When the Minnesota Timberwolves were first founded in 1989, they played their first season at the Metrodome. Their permanent home, Target Center, was being built and still under construction. It was decided that they would play their home games at the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome in Minneapolis. This was a multi-purpose stadium which first opened in 1982 and was mainly built for baseball and football. The Twins and the Vikings already shared the stadium, so for 1989 it would be an MLB, NFL, and NBA team all playing under one roof. For baseball and football it was pretty normal looking, but for basketball it was a different story. Obviously a basketball floor takes up much less space, so the playing surface was put into a corner of the dome, and then temporary seats were moved in from the outfield. This created an insane seating capacity of 50,000 for basketball games. That's well over twice as many as the average arena. During the time that the Timberwolves played there, they set what was at the time a new attendance record for an NBA game. There was also some crazy seats that were pretty far away. Anytime an NBA arena is put into an NFL or MLB stadium, it looks really weird, and there are a couple more that we will talk about. Overall, the Timberwolves played here for just the one season before moving into the brand new Target Center in 1990, which is where they still play today. One of the strangest MLB stadiums of all time is when the Los Angeles Dodgers played in the LA Coliseum. It was their first home when they moved to Los Angeles from Brooklyn after the 1957 season. They knew they wanted to build a new stadium, but they had to find a place to play in the meantime. It was decided that they would play in the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum. This stadium first opened in 1923. It has been the home of USC football ever since and has had countless other events. They've had Olympics there, as well as several other football and soccer teams. Baseball was probably the strangest configuration though. The left field line was just 250 feet from home plate. A temporary fence ended up being put up to even things out in right field, as well as a super high net in left field. The Dodgers played there for 4 seasons from 1958 to 1961, and even played a World Series there in 1959. After those 4 seasons, the Dodgers moved into their current home of Dodger Stadium in 1962. However, in 2008, the Dodgers played an exhibition game against the Boston Red Sox in the Coliseum. You can see the crazy setup of how things looked, and it was a pretty interesting game. Another strange MLB stadium is Fenway Park, which first opened back in 1912 and is the oldest current stadium. But from 1963 to 1968, it was also the home of the New England Patriots football team. Back then they were called the Boston Patriots, and they moved around quite a bit. They first played at Boston University Fields from 1960 to 1962, then at Fenway Park from 63 to 68, before playing 1 season at Alumni Stadium and Harvard Stadium each, before finally moving into Foxborough Stadium in 1971. As if Fenway Park wasn't interesting enough for baseball, at least it was built for it. For football, the infield dirt would be on the playing field during the baseball season, which is always weird. Temporary seats would be brought in left field in front of the Green Monster, and in some areas the seats were very close to the field and in others very far. It looked really strange with all the angles of the seats around. In recent years there have been several college football games played there. The setup is mostly the same with some small changes, and as you can see it works pretty good but still looks unusual. For NHL, the Tampa Bay Lightning played at Tropicana Field from 1993 to 1996. This stadium opened in 1990 as a multi-purpose stadium as a way to attract a Major League Baseball team to the city. It worked, with the Rays becoming an expansion team in 1998. However, before that, when the stadium first opened, it held various events like concerts. When the Tampa Bay Lightning became an NHL team in 1992, they first played at Expo Hall at the Florida State Fairgrounds. That arena was pretty strange itself for how small it was hosting an NHL team. The capacity was just 11,000. But the following year they moved into Tropicana Field, which was called the Florida Suncoast Dome at the time. The capacity there was much greater. It was much too large for an NHL arena, but better too big than too small, I guess, because now they could fit many more fans. However, the arena looked pretty strange. There were tons of seats on one side, and on the other not nearly as many, with curtains put up behind them. The ceiling was also extremely high, as well as some of the seats. The Lightning played there until 1996 when they moved into their new arena. Back to baseball, when the Los Angeles Angels first became an MLB team in 1961, they temporarily played at Wrigley Field. Not that Wrigley Field. There was another stadium called Wrigley Field that was in Los Angeles, California. The stadium opened in 1925, and from 25 to 1957, the Los Angeles Angels were a minor league baseball team. They played in the Chicago Cubs system, and both teams were owned by William Wrigley Jr., so that's why both parks had the same name. When the Angels became an MLB team, they played their first season there. However, it was pretty small, with the capacity just over 20,000. The design is also very interesting. You can see there are two decks basically run on top of each other, which was more popular back then. In left field, there was really no seats at all but just a wall and very little seats in right. The Angels ended up moving into the brand new Dodgers Stadium after their one season at Wrigley. After sharing with the Dodgers for a few seasons, they moved into Angels Stadium in 1966, and then proceeded to change their name 4 times. The Pontiac Silverdome was the home of the Detroit Pistons of the NBA from 1978 to 1988. This barely qualifies as temporary because they played there for 10 years. However, the Pistons were originally thought to be moving into Joe Louis Arena when it was built in 1979. The Pistons would have shared with the Detroit Red Wings. Pistons owner Bill Davidson was not happy with it and did not want to move there, so instead he moved into the Silverdome. I don't think it was ever meant to be a permanent solution. It took a while, but in 1985 they finally came up with plans for a new arena. So the Silverdome was originally opened in 1975 as the home of the Detroit Lions of the NFL. It was a domed stadium similar to several others such as the Metrodome in Minneapolis, with its 2 decks all around and the inflatable roof. As you could imagine, the stadium was much larger than needed for basketball. Similar to the Metrodome, they put the floor in one corner and then temporary seats around it. It's just really strange to see all the open space by it, especially the football field. It just doesn't look right. In 1988, the Pistons moved into the brand new arena, the Palace of Auburn Hills, where they played for about 30 years. The Silverdome would go on to be the home of the Lions until 2001, and then later demolished in 2017. One more NBA arena played in a larger stadium we will talk about is when the Toronto Raptors played in the Skydome. The Raptors of the NBA were founded in 1995 and played their first 5 seasons there. The Skydome, now called Rogers Center, originally opened in 1989. It was a multi-purpose stadium and home to the Toronto Blue Jays of the MLB, as well as the Toronto Argonauts of the Canadian Football League. This stadium looks very strange, just like the others. The difference here, though, is that they did not have the setup in the corner. The stadium's rounded design prevented that. Instead, it was along the first baseline for baseball, and they had to bring in temporary seats for 3 sides. This caused it to look even weirder than the others. Plus, seeing the turf removed and just gray flooring makes it even stranger. By 1997, construction on the new Air Canada Centre started. In 1999, it was completed, and the Raptors, as well as the Toronto Maple Leafs of the NHL, moved in. This arena fits basketball much better. Another stadium that barely qualifies as temporary is when the Blue Jays played in Exhibition Stadium. Before the Skydome, which we just talked about, opened, the Toronto Blue Jays of the MLB played at Exhibition Stadium. This was the first ever stadium for the Blue Jays when they joined the MLB in 1977. They ended up playing there 11 seasons, which is a decent amount of time. However, it was clear before long that the stadium was not great for baseball. Exhibition Stadium first opened in 1959, and it was the home of the Toronto Argonauts of the Canadian Football League. As you can see, it was built for football. It's also worth noting that Canadian football fields are larger than American football fields, being 150 yards total in length including the end zones and 65 yards wide. American football fields are about 120 yards long including the end zones total, and 53 yards wide. So the stadium was very long. When a baseball field was put in, it looked very strange, and there had to be some reconfiguring. There was a temporary wall put up in right field, but you could see how it just kept going beyond it. Some seats were extremely far from home plate, and being an outdoor stadium, the weather could also be a factor. The reconfiguring and trying to make it work for both sports caused problems for both baseball and football. By 1983, just 6 years after the Blue Jays moved in, planning began to build a new stadium, and by 1986, construction on the new stadium began, which was the Skydome. When it was complete, both the Blue Jays and the Argonauts moved in. The New York Football Giants played for 1 season at Shea Stadium. This stadium is best known for being the home of the New York Mets from 1964 to 2008. Located in Queens, New York, this stadium is pretty unique. When it first opened, it was also the home to the New York Jets football team. They played there all the way until 1983, and this stadium was pretty strange for football. But for just 1 season in 1975, it was the temporary home to the New York Giants. Shea Stadium had a very round design, but completely opened at one end. It was mainly built for baseball, and the football field had tons of open space on the sides. And at one end, there was hardly any seats at all, and then it was just open. The baseball infield would also take up about half the football field, which obviously looked strange. The Giants had been moving around quite a bit. They had played many years at Yankee Stadium, which was also pretty weird. Then they played at the Yale Bowl for 2 seasons, and then Shea Stadium for 1. Then they finally moved into Giants Stadium, where they played for many years. The final place we will look at in today's video is Mullett Arena. This is a multi-purpose indoor arena that belongs to Arizona State University. It's a pretty new arena, opening in 2022, and is the home of several Arizona State athletics. The main use would be ice hockey, but it's also used for wrestling, gymnastics, and volleyball. The capacity is just 5,000, which is pretty low, and from 2022 to 2024, it was also the temporary home of the Arizona Coyotes of the NHL. Inside the arena, it's very nice and new, just small. The average NHL arena ranges between 15 and 20,000 seats, so 5,000 seats was incredibly tiny. The Coyotes had played at Gila River Arena, but when their lease expired, they moved into Mullett Arena. They played there for 3 seasons until they unfortunately relocated to Utah. That's all for today's video. Let me know if I should make a part 2 and which stadium should be in it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.